Shadows of doubt. The autumn rain tapped against the windows of the penthouse apartment as Marcus Reed studied the blueprints spread across his home office desk. At 42, he had built his architectural firm from nothing into one of the most sought-after design houses in the city. Tonight, like most nights, he worked late, the soft glow of his desk lamp casting long shadows across the room. "Marcus, I made you some tea." He looked up to see Sophia standing in the doorway, one hand balancing a steaming mug, the other resting protectively over her 8-month pregnant belly. Her dark hair was pulled back in a loose ponytail, her olive skin glowing despite the obvious fatigue in her eyes. "Thanks," he said, clearing a space among the papers. "You should be resting." Sophia smiled, setting down the mug. "The baby's kicking too much for sleep." She moved behind him, resting her hands on his shoulders. "Besides, I miss you. You've been working so late this week." Marcus nodded absently, his attention already drifting back to the coastal resort project that had consumed him for months. He didn't notice the fleeting disappointment that crossed Sophia's face as she pressed a kiss to his temple and retreated from the room. Their relationship had always been one of comfortable silence. Marcus appreciated that about Sophia, her ability to give him space, to never push too hard against the walls he'd built around certain parts of himself. They had met 5 years ago when she interviewed him for a feature in the architectural magazine, where she worked as a senior writer. She had been sharp, insightful, and refreshingly straightforward. Within a year they were married, and Sophia had left her journalism career to focus on freelance work and eventually starting a family. The pregnancy had been unexpected, but not unwelcome. Marcus found himself warming to the idea of fatherhood, despite having no model for it in his own life. His father had abandoned the family when Marcus was just 7, and his mother had struggled with depression until her death when he was in college. Family, in Marcus's experience, was fragile and unreliable. Later that night, he closed his laptop and moved through the darkened apartment toward their bedroom. He paused when he heard Sophia's voice, soft but urgent, coming from the guest room. "I know it's risky, but I need to do this for him," she was saying. "No, I haven't told him yet." "I can't, not until I'm sure." Marcus froze, his heart suddenly pounding. Who was she talking to at midnight? He leaned closer to the door, which was slightly ajar. "Tomorrow at 2, then." "The usual place," Sophia continued. "I'll make an excuse about a doctor's appointment." There was a pause, then a soft laugh. "Thank you for understanding. This means everything to me, to us." Marcus backed away silently as Sophia ended the call. His mind raced with possibilities, none of them pleasant. Was she unhappy? Planning to leave him after the baby was born? Or was there something worse, someone else? He slipped into bed before she returned, pretending to be asleep. But as Sophia settled beside him, her breathing eventually deepening into slumber, Marcus lay awake, staring at the ceiling. A cold knot formed in his stomach as he recalled her secrecy over the past few weeks, the way she guarded her phone, the unexplained errands, the private smiles at text messages she quickly deleted. Marcus had built his life and career on precision and control. He analyzed problems, found solutions, created order from chaos. But now, in the quiet darkness of their bedroom, with Sophia sleeping peacefully beside him, carrying their child, he felt something he rarely allowed himself to feel. Fear. Tomorrow, he decided, he would find out what his wife was hiding. He would follow her to this usual place and confront whatever truth awaited him there. Because if there was one lesson Marcus had learned from his fractured childhood, it was that secrets eventually surfaced. And when they did, they usually destroyed everything in their path. Fractured trust. The digital clock on Marcus's dashboard read 1:45 p.m. as he parked his black sedan 3 blocks from the address he'd found in Sophia's navigation history. He had called his office claiming a migraine, something he hadn't done in 15 years of working. Now, with sunglasses and a baseball cap as his meager disguise, he felt ridiculous and ashamed, yet unable to stop himself. Sophia had left 30 minutes earlier, dressed more carefully than usual for what she claimed was a prenatal checkup. Marcus knew her actual appointment wasn't until next week. The lie had cemented his resolve to uncover the truth. He spotted her instantly, walking slowly along the tree-lined street, her burgundy maternity dress making her easy to track despite the crowded sidewalk. She paused at a small cafe with a blue awning, checked her watch, then went inside. Marcus waited 5 excruciating minutes before approaching, Through the window he could see Sophia seated at a corner table, her back to him. Across from her sat a man with salt and pepper hair, perhaps in his mid-50s. They were leaning toward each other, engaged in what appeared to be an intense conversation. As Marcus watched, frozen in place, the man reached across the table and took Sophia's hand. Something cold and heavy settled in Marcus's chest. He couldn't hear their words, but he could see Sophia's expression, earnest, pleading, and surprisingly intimate. The man nodded, squeezed her hand, then released it to pull out a manila envelope from his messenger bag. Marcus ducked out of sight as Sophia accepted the envelope, glanced inside, then placed it carefully in her purse. She wiped away what appeared to be a tear, then smiled at the man, a smile Marcus hadn't seen directed at him in months. He didn't confront her. Instead, he retreated to his car, mind spinning with possibilities, each more painful than the last. Who was this man? An ex-lover? A divorce attorney? The timing with the pregnancy couldn't be coincidental. That evening, Sophia returned home seemingly lighter, almost cheerful as she prepared dinner. "How was your day?" she asked, stirring pasta sauce that filled their kitchen with the scent of basil and garlic. "Fine," Marcus replied, watching her movements for any sign of guilt. "How was your appointment?" "Routine," she said, not meeting his eyes. "Everything's progressing normally." The lie hung between them like a physical barrier. Marcus wanted to shout, to demand the truth, but something held him back. Perhaps fear that his worst suspicions would be confirmed. Over the next 2 weeks, the pattern continued. Sophia took more mysterious calls, made excuses for brief absences, and twice more met with the same man. Marcus tracked her movements through her location sharing, which she'd never disabled. Each time he came close to confrontation but retreated at the last moment. Their home, once a sanctuary, became a stage where they both performed normalcy while harboring secrets. Marcus threw himself into work, often sleeping in his office under the pretense of project deadlines. Sophia didn't protest his absence, which only deepened his suspicions. At night, lying beside her yet feeling miles apart, Marcus would place his hand on her swollen belly, feeling their child move. In those moments, doubt would briefly recede, replaced by a primal connection to the life they had created. But by morning, the walls between them would rebuild themselves, higher and thicker than before. "We need to discuss names," Sophia said one evening, breaking their silent dinner. "The baby will be here in 3 weeks." Marcus looked up from his untouched meal. "Whatever you want is fine," he said flatly. Hurt flashed across Sophia's face. "This is your child too, Marcus. I'd like your input." "Is it?" The words escaped before he could stop them, harsh and accusatory. Sophia paled. "What did you just say?" "Nothing," Marcus muttered, pushing away from the table. "I have work to finish." "Marcus, wait." Her voice cracked with emotion. "Please talk to me." "Something's wrong, I know it is." He paused at the doorway, his back to her. "Are you happy, Sophia? With me, with this life?" "Of course I am," she said, confusion evident in her voice. "Why would you ask that? You've been secretive. Phone calls, meetings you lie about. Do you think I haven't noticed?" Sophia's silence confirmed everything. When she finally spoke, her voice was small. "It's not what you think. Then what is it?" he demanded, turning to face her. She pressed her lips together, eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I can't tell you yet. Please trust me, Marcus. Just a little longer." But trust had never come easily to Marcus, and now it seemed impossible. That night, as Sophia slept, he searched her purse for the manila envelope but found nothing. Whatever secrets it contained, she had hidden them well. 3 days later, as they moved through their increasingly strained routine, Sophia gasped suddenly while preparing breakfast. Her hands flew to her belly, and the orange juice pitcher she'd been holding crashed to the floor. "Sophia?" Marcus rushed to her side, professional instincts overriding personal hurt. "I think—" She grimaced, breathing heavily. "It's too early, but I think the baby is coming." In that moment, all suspicions were temporarily forgotten. Marcus guided her to the car, heart pounding with a new kind of fear, not of betrayal but of loss. As he sped toward the hospital, Sophia clutched his hand tightly. "Marcus," she whispered between contractions, "in my closet behind the winter sweaters, there's a box. If anything happens to me—" "Nothing is going to happen," he interrupted firmly, unable to bear the thought. Sophia squeezed his hand harder. "Promise me you'll look. Promise me." Reluctantly, he nodded, not knowing that within hours, Everything he thought he knew about his wife and their marriage would be fundamentally changed forever. Unraveling threads. The hospital waiting room was a sterile purgatory of uncomfortable chairs and outdated magazines. Marcus paced the length of it, checking his watch compulsively as nurses came and went with updates on Sophia's condition. Complications had arisen, something about fetal distress and dropping blood pressure, and they had whisked her away for an emergency C-section, leaving Marcus alone with his churning thoughts. "Mr. Reed?" Marcus turned to find a nurse in blue scrubs watching him with sympathy. "Your wife is asking for you. The doctor has approved a brief visit before surgery." In the pre-op room, Sophia looked small and vulnerable beneath the harsh fluorescent lights. Monitors beeped steadily around her, tracking 2 heartbeats, hers and their child's. "Marcus," she whispered, reaching for his hand. Her face was pale, her eyes glassy from medication. "Remember what I said about the box?" He nodded, throat tight with conflicting emotions, concern for her health warring with the lingering ache of betrayal. "There's something else," she continued, her words slightly slurred. "Julian will be here soon." I called him from the ambulance. Marcus stiffened. "Julian? Who is Julian?" Before Sophia could answer, a doctor appeared, informing them it was time. As they wheeled her away, Sophia called out, "He has answers you need, Marcus. Please listen to him." Left alone again, Marcus slumped into a chair, burying his face in his hands. Julian. The name meant nothing to him, yet Sophia had spoken it with such familiarity. Was this the gray-haired man from the cafe? What answers could he possibly have that would justify Sophia's deception? An hour into his vigil, a tall man with familiar salt and pepper hair appeared in the waiting room doorway, scanning the faces until he spotted Marcus. Their eyes met and something passed between them, a flash of recognition that made no sense. "Marcus," the man said, approaching cautiously. "I'm Julian Harmon. Sophia called me." Marcus stood, fists clenching involuntarily. "Who are you to my wife?" Julian's expression shifted to confusion. "She didn't tell you who I am?" When Marcus remained silent, Julian sighed heavily. "I'm not surprised. Sophia wanted to wait until she had everything in order." He paused, then continued quietly. "I'm your father's brother, your uncle." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. "That's impossible. My father was an only child." "No," Julian said gently. "That's what he wanted people to believe after the falling out with our parents. I've been trying to find you for years, but your father, my brother Richard, made it difficult. He changed your last name from Harmon to Reed after the divorce." Marcus shook his head, denial rising like bile. "My father abandoned us when I was 7. He never looked back, never sent a word. Why would you search for me now?" "Because Richard died 3 months ago," Julian replied, his voice heavy with an emotion Marcus couldn't name. "Liver failure. Before he died, he asked me to find you, to tell you the truth about our family." The room seemed to tilt sideways. Marcus gripped the back of a chair for support. "And Sophia? How does she fit into this?" "She found me first, actually, through her investigative journalism background. When she learned she was pregnant, she started researching your family medical history. Something you'd told her was a blank slate. She was concerned about hereditary conditions that might affect your child." The pieces began to align, forming a picture entirely different from what Marcus had imagined. The meetings, the secrecy, were her gathering information about your family, Julian confirmed. Medical records, photos, letters. She wanted to create a complete family history for your child. When she discovered I was alive, your only living blood relative besides your father, she reached out. "Why didn't she tell me?" Marcus demanded, though the answer was already forming in his mind. Julian's gaze was direct, unflinching. "She tried in the beginning, but you shut down any mention of your father or your past. She worried you'd refuse to hear the truth if you knew what she was doing." Before Marcus could respond, a doctor appeared in the doorway. "Mr. Reed, your wife is in recovery. There were some complications, but she's stable. And congratulations, you have a daughter." Relief washed over Marcus, momentarily displacing the confusion of Julian's revelations. "And the baby? Is she healthy?" The doctor nodded. 6 pounds, 2 ounces. A bit early, but strong. "There's something else you should know." He hesitated. "Your daughter has a congenital condition, a genetic anomaly called heterochromia iridium. Different colored eyes. One blue, one amber. It's completely harmless, just unusual. Marcus froze. Different colored eyes? Julian stepped forward. It runs in our family. Your grandmother had it. So did Richard. I need to see them, Marcus said, already moving toward the door, leaving Julian behind with promises to return. His mind raced faster than his feet as he followed a nurse through sterile corridors. If what Julian said was true, if this eye condition was a Harmon family trait, then the child was undeniably his. And Sophia's secrecy took on an entirely different meaning. In the recovery room, Sophia lay sleeping, her face peaceful for the first time in weeks. Beside her, in a clear hospital bassinet, lay a tiny bundle wrapped in a pink blanket. With trembling hands, Marcus approached his daughter. Gently he lifted her, cradling her head in his palm. Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused but unmistakable, one deep blue, one amber gold, just like the doctor had described. In that moment, staring into those mismatched eyes that connected his daughter to a family history he'd spent decades trying to forget, Marcus felt the walls he'd built around his heart begin to crumble. What had he done? What had he almost thrown away with his suspicion and fear? He looked at Sophia's sleeping form, remembering the box she'd mentioned. Whatever it contained, he knew now it wasn't evidence of betrayal, but of love. A love deep enough to search for truths he'd been too afraid to face. Part 4. The birth of Truth. Marcus returned home at dawn to shower and collect necessities for Sophia's hospital stay. The house felt different, emptier yet somehow charged with significance, as though the walls themselves were waiting for something to change. He remembered Sophia's words. In my closet, behind the winter sweaters. There's a box. In their bedroom, Marcus pushed aside the hanging clothes in Sophia's closet until he found it. An old wooden chest about the size of a shoebox, with a small brass lock. The key hung from a ribbon looped around the handle. His hands trembled slightly as he opened it. Inside lay an envelope addressed to him in Sophia's elegant handwriting, resting atop a collection of documents, photographs, and what appeared to be medical records. Marcus took the letter and sat on the edge of their bed, the same bed where he'd lain awake for weeks, consumed by unfounded suspicions. My dearest Marcus, if you're reading this, our baby has arrived, and I've finally found the courage to share what I've been working on these past months. Or perhaps something has happened to me and you've found this as I asked you to. When I learned I was pregnant, I became acutely aware of how little we knew about your family medical history. You've always said your past was a closed book, and I've respected that boundary, but our child deserves to know where they come from. Not just my side of the family, but yours too. What began as a search for medical information became something more when I discovered your Uncle Julian. Yes, Marcus, you have an uncle, and through him I learned about your father and grandparents, about the family rift that separated you from them, and about medical conditions that run in your bloodline. The heterochromia, the different colored eyes our baby may have, is just one of them. There's a full genetic workup in this box, along with family photos Julian shared, letters your father wrote but never sent, and the deed to your grandparents' old summer house in Maine, which is now legally yours. I kept this from you because when I first mentioned finding your father, you became so angry, so closed off. I was afraid of losing you to that darkness again. Perhaps that was wrong of me. Perhaps I should have pushed harder, been more honest. For that I am truly sorry. But everything I did out of love, for you and for our child. I wanted to heal the broken pieces of your past, so our future could be whole. Whatever you decide to do with this information is your choice. I only ask that you try to forgive not just me for my secrecy, but yourself for the walls you've built, and maybe someday your father for his failures. All my love. Sophia. Marcus read the letter twice, tears blurring his vision. He set it aside and began examining the box's other contents. Birth certificates, including his own with the surname Harmon crossed out and Reed written in, medical records detailing the heterochromia and other genetic traits specific to his family line, photographs of people whose features mirrored his own, including a woman with one blue eye and one amber eye, smiling with a young boy who must have been his father. At the bottom of the box lay a DNA test report. Marcus scanned it, understanding dawning as he read the results. A genetic comparison between samples from himself, his father, collected posthumously, and Julian, confirming their biological relationship beyond doubt. Everything Sophia had hidden from him was evidence not of betrayal, but of devotion. A wife's desperate attempt to give her husband the family connections he'd been denied, to provide their child with a complete ancestry, rather than the void Marcus had carried his entire life. Shame washed over him as he remembered his coldness, his suspicion, the accusations he'd nearly hurled at her. How close he had come to destroying everything they'd built together, all because he couldn't believe someone would go to such lengths out of love for him. The hospital called as he was repacking the box. Sophia was awake and asking for him. Their daughter, still unnamed, was doing well, her vitals strong despite her early arrival. Marcus gathered what they needed and placed Sophia's box carefully in his car. On the drive back to the hospital, he called Julian, arranging to meet him later. There were conversations to be had, relationships to rebuild or perhaps build for the first time. When he entered Sophia's room, she was sitting up in bed, their daughter cradled in her arms. She looked up, her expression cautious, uncertain. "I found the box," Marcus said simply, setting down his bags and moving to her bedside. Sophia's eyes filled with tears. "And?" He took her hand, squeezing it gently. "And I'm sorry. So sorry for doubting you, for pulling away when you needed me most. I should have told you what I was doing," she whispered. "I was afraid you'd shut down completely if I pushed too hard about your family." "You were right to worry," Marcus admitted. "I probably would have, but that's no excuse for how I've behaved these past weeks." He looked down at their daughter, her mismatched eyes now closed in peaceful sleep. "She has my grandmother's eyes, apparently." Sophia nodded. "Eleanor Harmon. She was an artist. Julian says you have her hands, long fingers, good with detail." The knowledge felt strange, like putting on clothes that belonged to someone else yet somehow fit perfectly. For so long, Marcus had defined himself by absence, the absence of family, of history, of belonging. Now Sophia had given him connection, context, roots. "I met Julian at the hospital yesterday," Marcus said. "He told me about my father, about Richard. Are you angry with me for finding him, for learning he had died?" Marcus considered the question carefully. "No, I'm not angry. I'm grateful. All these years I thought he just vanished, that he didn't care enough to even check if I was alive. Now I know he at least thought of me at the end." He paused, emotion threatening to overwhelm him. That matters somehow. Sophia shifted their daughter in her arms, offering her to Marcus. "Would you like to hold her? We still need to decide on a name." As he cradled his daughter, looking into her peaceful face, a face that somehow contained echoes of people he'd never met but who were part of him nonetheless, Marcus felt a sense of completion he'd never experienced before. "What about Eleanor?" he suggested softly. "After my grandmother." Sophia's smile was radiant through her tears. "Eleanor Reed. It's perfect." In that moment, holding his daughter and meeting his wife's gaze with newfound openness, Marcus realized that family wasn't just about blood or history or genetic traits passed down through generations. It was about choice. The choice to love, to trust, to forgive. Sophia had made that choice for him when he couldn't make it for himself, and in doing so, had given him back pieces of himself he hadn't even known were missing. Part 5. Healing. Bridges 3 months after Eleanor's birth, the Reed household had settled into a new rhythm. The nursery, painted a soft green with white trim, was filled with the gentle sounds of a sleeping baby and the occasional whir of the monitor. In the living room, Marcus sat across from Julian, family albums spread between them on the coffee table. "That's your father at 16, Julian said, pointing to a lanky boy with a rebellious smile. Already planning his escape from our parents' expectations, Marcus studied the photograph, searching for similarities to his own teenage self. Were they very strict? Demanding, rather than strict. Our father built his business from nothing, expected the same drive from his sons. Richard, your father, resented the pressure. I tolerated it better." Julian's expression softened with memory. "He was brilliant, though. Could have been anything he wanted. Except a father, Marcus said, the old bitterness briefly resurfacing. Julian nodded, not defending his brother. He failed you there, without question, but I think he regretted it, especially toward the end. From the kitchen came the sound of Sophia preparing tea, giving the men space for their conversation while remaining within reach. Over the past months, she had carefully facilitated these meetings, never pushing but always supporting as Marcus navigated his complicated feelings about the family he never knew. Eleanor has his laugh, Sophia said, entering with a tray of tea and cookies. That little hiccup at the end, I noticed it yesterday. Marcus smiled, accepting the cup she offered. The thought no longer pained him as it once might have. Julian brought more medical records from the family doctor. Nothing concerning, just good to have for her file. And photos of the main property, Julian added. It needs work, but the location is spectacular, right on the water. The summer house had been another revelation, a tangible inheritance Marcus hadn't known existed. They'd visited once, finding a weathered Cape Cod-style cottage overlooking a rocky beach, neglected but structurally sound. Already Marcus had drawn up renovation plans, imagining summers there with Eleanor building sandcastles and learning to swim. I've been thinking, Marcus said, setting down his cup. I'd like to restore the house using as much of the original material as possible. Keep it connected to its history, the way Sophia did with our family story. Sophia squeezed his hand, understanding the significance of his words. For an architect who had built his career on modern, forward-looking designs, this embrace of preservation represented a profound shift in perspective. Speaking of restoration, Julian said, reaching into his messenger bag, the same one Marcus had once watched with suspicion at the cafe. I brought something else you might want. He withdrew a small wooden box, similar to the one Sophia had compiled but much older. The wood darkened with age. This belonged to your grandmother Eleanor, family keepsakes mostly. Her wedding ring, some letters, a few small watercolors she painted. She always said they should go to her grandchildren someday. Marcus accepted the box carefully, opening it to find a collection of delicate treasures, tangible connections to a woman whose eyes his daughter had inherited, but who had died long before he could know her. Thank you, he said simply, the words inadequate for the gift of history Julian had given him. Later that evening, after Julian had gone and Eleanor was fed and settled for the night, Marcus and Sophia sat on their balcony, watching the city lights shimmer against the darkening sky. I've been offered a freelance assignment, Sophia said, her tone casual but her eyes watching for his reaction. Just a small piece for my old magazine. They want me to write about historical home restoration, actually. That's wonderful, Marcus said sincerely. Will you take it? She nodded. I think so. It feels right to start easing back into writing, and my mother has already volunteered to watch Eleanor on the days I need to research or conduct interviews. Marcus took her hand, running his thumb over her wedding ring. I'm sorry I ever made you feel you had to choose between your career and our family. You didn't, she corrected gently. I made that choice myself. But now I think I can have both, in a balance that works for us. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the kind of silence that had characterized their early relationship, but now felt richer, deeper for all they had weathered together. I've been thinking about what you did, Marcus said finally, searching for my family when I couldn't face it myself. It was an extraordinary act of love. Sophia turned to him, her expression serious. It wasn't just for you or even for Eleanor. It was for us, all of us. I believe we're shaped by where we come from, even the parts we don't know about or try to forget. I wanted our daughter to have a complete picture, not one with missing pieces. Like I had, Marcus acknowledged. Yes. And I wanted you to know that your story didn't begin with abandonment, that there was more, both good and bad, but it was yours to know. Marcus nodded, understanding now what he couldn't before. You took a huge risk. I could have refused to look at any of it. That was always a possibility, Sophia agreed. But I believed in us enough to try. From inside the apartment came the soft sound of Eleanor stirring through the baby monitor. Without discussion, Marcus rose to check on her, returning moments later with their daughter cradled against his shoulder, her heterochromatic eyes blinking sleepily at the world. She wanted to join the conversation, he said with a smile, settling back beside Sophia. As Eleanor reached out a tiny hand to grasp her mother's finger, Marcus felt the completeness of the circle they formed, past, present, and future intertwined. The shadows of doubt that had once threatened to darken their lives had been replaced by understanding, by the knowledge that love sometimes requires faith beyond what seems reasonable, beyond the limitations of one's own fears and wounds. "I'm thinking of calling my next design Harmon House," he said, watching Eleanor's eyes drift closed again, secure in her father's arms. "A nod to where I came from." Sophia leaned against him, her head on his shoulder. "I think that's perfect." In the quiet of the evening, with the city sprawled below them and the stars emerging above, Marcus Reed, architect, husband, father, nephew, grandson, felt the solidity of belonging that had eluded him for so long. The truth Sophia had uncovered hadn't been what he feared, but rather what he needed. That family, with all its complexities and imperfections, was not something to fear but something to embrace, to build upon, to pass down with honesty and love. Eleanor sighed in her sleep, her mismatched eyes moving beneath delicate lids, perhaps dreaming of the generations that had come before her, whose stories would now be part of her own. And Marcus, watching his daughter dream, made a silent promise to honor Sophia's gift by always choosing trust over fear, truth over comfortable denial, and love, most importantly love, over the protective walls he'd once believed were necessary to survive. For in the end, it was not walls but bridges that had saved him. Bridges built by Sophia's quiet determination, spanning the chasms of his past and connecting him to a future richer than he had ever dared to imagine.